We're going to start Chelik Beis of the Kovetz. This Chelik focuses on two Sichos in Sefer Sichos, Parshas Ekev Tashin and Aleph and Parshas Re'eh Tashin and Aleph. And these two Sichos, the Rebbe explains a new kav in the Aveda of Elul and Vani Vodedi Li. A little bit different to what we explained in Tona in the last Shiur, of all those Sichos that explain the Melech Basodeh. And this Sichos, the Rebbe explains the חיבור of the two Avedas of Vani Vodedi Li. Just to recap from last year we focused on four different sichos that explain the Moshe Melech Basodeh, how Melech Basodeh explains the Aveda Vani Vodedi Li. The Rebbe explains in the Likkutei Sichos, based on the Avodat, how the Elul is Asher an Lidei Vodedi Li. And the reason for that is, like how the Rebbe explains over there, that in order for Yid to Mekabel Ilmach Shamayim, in order for Yid to connect to the Eibishter, in a way of Kabbalah Sale, he has to get it from Milmayli, he has to get it from Masrus Leil, he has to get it from the Eibishter. Because that is something which is nimshchut in Nivroim. It's a koyach that Nivroim don't have mitzad atzmum. Nivroim mitzad atzmum aren't able to connect to something which is higher than their mitzvahs. And in order to have that, they have to have a special koyach mamayla. That mamayla is made Kabbalah say Mach Shamayim. Mamayla is made the union of Malchus of the Eibishter, and that the year of the Eibishter, and that gives koyach for you the rest of the year to have year of the Eibishter, to have fear of the Eibishter. That happens as Shonim Yom Kippur. The month of Tishrei in general is where there's a Gilui Eir, Mamayla to give the Koyach of it to Yid's Aved throughout the year. In order for that to work, in order for the Koyach, Mamayla, B'chlal, to come into, to have a Keshet in Nivroim, that has to be, the Rebbe said in one line, that has to be the Aveda of the Tachan, that has to be, Surus al-Lasata, that has to be an Aveda, the Nivra has to do something in order to be ready for such a Aveda. And that's the Aveda of Elul. That's why Elul is at a Shotevis Ani Lidei, because the Ani is Elul is the time that the Ani starts connecting to the Deidi. The Ani, the person, his mitzvahs, with his agbalis, starts connecting to the Eibishter. So all that. So when it comes to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, he's able to be a kli for this for the Gilui that's made on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So what comes out from the Likkutei is the main Aveda is the main inyan that he's come to explain over there is the inyan of the Aveda of Tishrei, the Aveda of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. In order for that to work, you have to have the Aveda of Ani L'Deidi. You have to have a achana from the Nivra's perspective. Now, in order for a Nivra to explain, to B'chlal, be able to connect to the Eibishter in his perspective, to connect to the Eibishter with his akbalas, you have to have the Moshe Melech Basodeh. You have to have a Koyach Mamayla that should help the Nivra B'chlal prepare for such a Gilui. And that was the Moshe Melech Basodeh. And explained four different Eifanim how the Moshe Melech Basodeh connects with Aveda Vani Vodedi Li. The Moshe Melech Basodeh is in his Koyach that a Yid should be able to wake up for his and make his achanas to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So that is the classic hasbara on Elul. The Elul is Asher Ani L'Deidi Vodedi Li. The reason why Elul is Asher Ani L'Deidi is because the main Aveda of Elul is Ani L'Deidi, is that a Yid wake up, a Yid connects to the Eibishter, and the Vodedi Li comes on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So what comes out from here, the Elul is achana to Tishrei, and therefore since it's achana to Tishrei, you have to have the Ani L'Deidi aspect of Elul. Now, the Fiza Kumteis, according to what we just explained now, that Elul is achana to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So the shaila is, why is Elul Rosh Hashanah Ani L'Deidi Vodedi Li? Elul should only be Rosh Hashanah Ani L'Deidi if the Aveda of Elul is achana to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and that Elul is the Aveda of Ani L'Deidi mitzad atzma, that a person prepares himself as achana to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that he gives his ani over, that he connects with his own terms with the Eibishter. So l'cheira, the Vodedi Li isn't supposed to be part of Rosh Hashanah Elul. Now that Vodedi Li, the Sus Leila is opposite of Ani L'Deidi. Ani L'Deidi, which is a Sus L'Sata, shows on Yid's Aveda connecting with his agbalis, and it's not me'achel. That's what Al Rebbe gives the Moshe Melech Basodeh to show that it's a weekday, that it's a Yid connecting to the Eibishter on his terms and his agbalis. Vodedi Li is complete opposite. Vodedi Li means the Yid has to go out of his agbalis. Vodedi Li shows in the Aveda of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, which then is a Yom Tif, and it's also Basiyas Malacha, and the Yid has to stop doing Malacha because the Malacha is a stira to the Gila, which is made in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And so that shows on the Yid connecting to something higher than his mitzvahs, which is the Surus Leila, which means that there's a Gila in Mamayla. Taki comes after the Surus L'Sata, but the Surus L'Sata is made a Gila Mamayla, which is higher than a person's mitzvahs. So l'chayra, the Aveda of Deidi Li should not be in the Rosh Hashanah of Ani L'Deidi. That's the question that Rebbe asks in these two sichos, and the Rebbe touched on this question quite a few mamarim of Ani L'Deidi, especially in Ani L'Deidi Tashin Chavav. And over there, the Rebbe connects it to the Moshe Melech Basodeh. The Melech Basodeh is Takar Surus Leila, and they come taking El, and that's why El has Rosh Tevis of Ani Ladedi and also Vodedi Li, because El also has the aspect of Melech Basodeh, and that which comes, that which the Seder B'Peil, the Melech Basodeh comes before the Aveda B'Keich Atzim, so it should have been Dedi Li V'Ani Lei, because the Kavanah of Melech Basodeh is Dafka for Ani Ladedi. Over there, the Rebbe basically says that Melech Basodeh, this Galas Yizigim Mitzrachamim, is this Surah Leila, and that Taked comes in El to make a Yid to his Aveda. And that's why in El, you also have Rosh Tevis of Ani Ladedi Vodedi Li, because Vodedi Li doesn't go on Hashem Yom Kippur, Vodedi Li goes on his Galas Yud Gimel Mitzrachim, which is the Mashal Melech Basodeh. Over here, the Rebbe has a different kav. In these two sichos, the Rebbe is going to explain how, even though Bapel Chassidus usually explains that the Avodah of Ani Ladedi is in Elul. Elul is the main aspect of Elul is Ani Ladedi. But we're going to see that since the Rosh Tevis of Ani Ladedi is also Vodedi Li, it's mantzich a yid to have an Avodah of Vodedi Li also in Chedesh Elul. Now, to be masbir this, the Rebbe starts in Siv Gimel of Parshas Eikev Tashin Aleph, which is page 57 of the Kovetz. The Rebbe starts explaining in general the difference between Yisusul Asat and Yisusul Leila. But Derech Klal in Chassidus we explain that you have a concept of Yisusul Asat and then you have a concept of Yisusul Leila. Yisusul Asat means that a person does his Aveda, does his pull down the mata to connect to the Eibishter, and that is Me'erid Alukuz Shmi Nimshach Shmi Mamshach Hamshach Mu'mayla. Every single mitzvah a person does, the person has to do their pull of the mitzvah, and every mitzvah brings the Hamshach Mu'mayla, which is shaykh to that mitzvah. Now, if you speak about the Avodah Sa'adam, what part of what does a person play in this inyan of the Susul Asata and Susul Leila Pashtos? The person is only connected to the Susul Asata part of it. When a person does a pull, when the Tata has a Yisrael, when the Nivra does a pula Musuyemes, that pula Musuyemes is Mamshich Mumayla. So the Amshach which comes from Mayla Taka came because of his Aveda. That doesn't have to do with his Aveda. He doesn't have to work to connect to the Susul Leil. The person eats matzah on Pesach, for example. So matzah on Pesach is Mamshach Emunah. So the person eats matzah on Pesach, the pull he has to do is he has to eat matzah. That which the Emunah is Nimshach comes to Derech HaMelech. It's true that the matzah is Mamshach Emunah, but that comes to Derech HaMelech, any mitzvah. The mitzvah, the Amshach which comes to the mitzvah comes to the comes as a tzitzah of his pull. But in his pull doesn't have to have a connection to that tzitzah. When a person eats matzah, that matzah doesn't have to look differently because of Mamshach Emunah. Bala matzah yotze. A person has to eat matzah. He does the pull. And any aveda that an Nivra does, the aveda sa'adam, the adam aspect shabazeh, the aveda aspect of shabazeh has to do with the susul asata. Whatever nimshach afterwards, that comes inside the Eibishter. The Eibishter decided when a person eats matzah, then it's going to be nimshach as hamshach. When a person puts on tefillin, the Eibishter is going to put on tefillin. But that hamshach that's nimshach doesn't come through his aveda. It comes because of his aveda. Because he did this in this pula. And the Eibishter decided, like we explained in last Shiur, that kach olam b'tzaynei, that through a nivra mugbal doing a certain pula, that pula is going to be tevis makim. That pula is going to be significant enough to mamshech the lakush should be made as an azagid. But that which that the pula that he does, that's the sulusul asata aspect of it. Or in our context, Elul, the Aveda Sa'adam is Elul. Elul is when a person connects to the Eibishter. What happens in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that comes as a tzitzah of Yid's Aved. But a Yid doesn't have to work on the Hamshach of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Adrab. He has to go out of his mitzias, go out of his akbalas, because you have a gila that's made over it. And the gila that's made, it's not negea if you're mugbal or you're not mugbal. What's negea is that the gila is there. But it's not negea to your Aveda. Instead, your Aveda isn't connected to the gila. Al derech, the inyan of Riyah and Shmir. When a person sees something, when a person hears something. When a person sees something, what's negea here is not negea his Aveda. It's not negea what he does. It's negea that the inyan happened. What he did, where he was, how he understood the inyan. And if the inyan is understood or is not understood, it's not negea. The inyan happened. The inyan was made. When a person sees a picture, it's not negea if he understands how the picture works, he understands how the artist painted the picture. He saw the picture. Since he saw the picture was made by him, and therefore, it's not negeh his aved. It's not negeh if he does anything for the picture. It's not negeh if he understands anything, or his matzav when he saw the picture. As opposed to when it comes to shmir, when a person understanding something, since it's his aveda, he has to understand it according to his keiches. It's negeh how he understands, and everyone has their eisus hamachshav. Everyone has their keicha hatfisa, and they're able to understand in different ways. Why? Because the Indian is that his Aveda. So Elul is Rosh Tevis Ani Ludodi. Elul is the Rosh Tevis of Avedis Adam when a person is made at Truvaton mitzad his own keiches. Then you have Hashanah Yom Kippur, and Hashanah Yom Kippur is made a Gilum Maila. And when it's made a Gilum Maila, then a person doesn't have to be a student, he doesn't have to, it's not connected to his Aveda. That's what Pashtos, how we learn the concept of Yisrus L'Sat and Yisrus L'Leil. Now the Rebbe in Kam V'Kam V'Kemis brings in the Kudeh that if you touch that's the pshat in Yisrus L'Leil, if you touch that's the pshat of Amshacha that comes through mitzvahs, that the Amshacha that comes through mitzvahs doesn't have to do actually with your Aveda, meaning the person doesn't play a role in the Amshacha that comes through his Aveda, then at the end of the day there's no connection between the Amshacha and the Aveda. That the pull that a person doesn't have a direct connection to the Hamshach that was Nimshach. And if the pull doesn't have a direct connection to the Hamshach that was Nimshach, it's not able to come premise into the person. It's not able to be internalized by the person that this Hamshach was Nimshach through his mitzvah. In order for a person to have a connection to his Lusal Leila, in order for a person to have a connection to the Hamshach that is Nimshach, the person himself has to have an Aveda which is Bedugma of his Lusal Leila. Adarach, we find that the Eibishter gives different Avedas to Yid, which are higher than his Metzias. For example, Mesiras Nefesh. The Eibishter gave the Aveda of Mesiras Nefesh to be Mamshech B'li Gvul into the world. Every mitzvah is Mamshech B'li Gvul. But Mesiras Nefesh is Mamshech B'li Gvul in the Galadik way. That Hagam, that it's Mesiras Nefesh of a Nivra. That he's taka a Mugbal, even when a Nivra is going, even when a Nivra is going Mesiras Nefesh. It's not the emes of Bligvul because he's still a nivra, he's still a creation, he still has definitions. And therefore it can't be that he's going completely connecting to something which is truly unlimited. But for Fernando Razai, that's what the Eibishter wanted. The Eibishter wanted that a nivra should do a pull down here, which is bedum, with Bligvul, and that can be mamshech the Bligvul Velakos. And when that's mamshech the Bligvul Velakos, it has a connection to the nivra's pull. That the nivra's pull wasn't a mugbul dekapul, the nivra's pull was a Bligvul dekapul. So Bekitzer, that which is Yisrus L'Sat and Yisrus L'Leila, it's not pshat that when a person, you have the Avedas Adam, which is Yisrus L'Sat, and then you have Yisrus L'Leila, which comes from Mitzad Atzmi. No, a person Mitzad, his Aveda has to have a dugma and a eifan of Yisrus L'Leila. And that is why Elul is Rosh Tevis, because Elul is the sikkim of the whole year. Like the Rebbe explains in the next Sikha Parshas Re'eh, that Elul comes as a hemshech to Pesach also. It's a achana to the next year. So it's taka mitzad that Indian, it's Yisrus L'Sat, but mitzad Sheni, it's also a sikkim of the whole year. It's also a sikkim of Pesach, and Pesach is Yisrus L'Leil. And therefore Elul has two inyanim in it. Taka has the Aveda of Liddoidi, the Ani giving himself over and having Yisrus L'Sat, which that is why the first letters of the word is Aleph Lamed. Mitzad Sheni, it also has the Aveda of Yisrus L'Leil. It has an aspect of Yisrus L'Leil, and that's Mamshech, and that itself brings that when the Amshacha comes down on Hashanah Yom Kippur, that's Nimshach in Primis. What does this mean? An Aveda of Yisrus L'Leil. Mainly, Tam Yisrus L'Sata, that a person, a Gvul serves the Lakos Mitzad the Gvul's terms, so a person can understand. But what does it mean that a Nivra Mugbul should have an Aveda of Yisrus L'Leil? So the Rebbe brings out this concept in three different efanim. If you could say it's Elam, Shalom, and Nefesh. How we see how the Eibishter created the world, that every single part of the world had these two nekudis, sai a Yisrus L'Sata part of it, sai a Mamata L'Mayla Dika Aveda, and sai the Aveda Mamayla L'Matatu. Now when we see this in Zman, that the definition of Zman is Akbal. The definition of Zman means it's limited, it's mugdar. Not only is Zman itself is limited, anything in this world that exists has to be under the definitions of Zman. So Zman brings out the concept of Akbal, Zman brings out the concept of a Nivra. A Nivra means that it's Mukbal Zman and Makim. Since man brings out the epitome of a Nivra, since man brings out the concept of a Nivra, Chiddush Taka brings out that Zman itself is a Nivra. Zman itself wasn't something that always existed. Zman was created, B'Sheish and Me'ebreish, Zman, when the Eibishter created the world, the Eibishter created the concept of time. Which is all Riches and Chassidus, and brings down from the Magid. I'm not going to get into it now, but the concept of Zman is a Nivra. Now, the way the Eibishter made that the Seder of Bria works, the Eibishter created that the Zman started on Yom Rishon. So too during the week starts on Yom Rishon. The week starts on Sunday. From Sunday it goes to Monday. And from Yom Sheni it goes to Yom Shlishi until you get to Yom HaShabbos. And all these days are going, Mamata L'Mayla, all these days are going on preparing for Mamata starting from nothing, starting from Sunday, going further, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, until Misha Tarech B'Erev Shabbos, Yechim B'Shabbos, until a person gets to Shabbos, where the concept of Shabbos is the end of the week. So the Eibishter created the concept of Zman, that it goes with Mata L'Mayla, that it goes with a Seder, B'Eifim Mugbal, from the beginning of the week to the end of the week. So that's how in Zman you have the inyan of Mata L'Mayla. In Zman you have a Seder that is Mugbal, and that Seder goes again and again and again in a steady Seder Mata L'Mayla. Then you come to Shabbos. Even though Shabbos is Taka Chilik Zman, and therefore it's part of this Seder of Sunday, Monday going until Shabbos, but Tzazam Midem, Shabbos is Kadma Leila. It's brought down in Kabbalah that the concept, even before you had the Musig of Zman, which is a Nivra, or the Zman that we have is a Nivra, you already had the concept of Shabbos. So the Yom HaShabbos is a day which Be'etzem is L'maynim Zman. It's a day that pre-existed the concept of Zman, where we have Zman as a Mugbudik Mitzvahs. And together with that we say that Shabbos is Taka one of the days of the week. So together with it being one of the days of the week, it was created before the week. It was created before the concept of Zman. And not only that, Shabbos is Mevarich, Minemi is Baruch Kol Yom, and Shabbos gives bracha from being Hechad and Eilim, because Shabbos is higher than Eilim, it's higher than Zman, it has a kech to give bracha to Mizbarach Kol Yom, and then all the days of the week they get that bracha from Shabbos. So in Zman, the concept of Mamayla Lamata comes from Shabbos. That Shabbos is a concept which is Mamayla, Shabbos is a concept which is higher than the Mata, higher than the concept of Akbala, and that gives kech, Mamayla Lamata, to be Mamshich, bracha into the Metzias of Zman, the Metzias of Hagbala, the way we have it in the Sheishes Me'er Shavua. So that is the way we have these two inyanim, how together with Taka being Hagbala in Velt. We're not talking about two Surah Leil which comes by itself. We're talking about in Velt, in the Metzias of Bria, you have the Eibishter created, number one, a concept of Mamata L'Mayla, which that is the Me'er Shavua goes from Sunday to Shabbos in Eifin Mugbal, doesn't change. And Mitzad Sheni, you have Yom HaShabbos, which is Minei is Baruch Kol Yom, and Shabbos is Betzim higher than Zman, is Mevarich Kol Me'er Shavua. That is the way it's in Zman. Now these two concepts aren't only two inyanim in Zman, but they're two inyanim in a Yid. A Yid Betzim has these two inyanim in him too. Mitzad Achad Yid has a neshama, which the neshama is a chelik elika mimal mamish. He said the neshama is something which is higher than Velt. It's something which is mamayla, higher than Velt. And Mitzad Sheni, the Eibishter gave a Yid a guf. And the guf, where does the guf come from? As opposed to the neshama, which is a chelik elika mimal mamish, the guf is punk fakir. The guf comes from Afar min Adama. He says the shayrish of the guf comes from Afar. So mitzad is neshama is takim mamayla mat. Mitzad is neshama da is to be mamshach alakos into Velt. And the way he does that is take not by Velt not being tevis makim by him. The neshama is a chelik elika mimal, which is higher than Velt. And that is the character mamshach alakos down here. Mamayla mat. Mitzad sheni, the Eibishter gave you the guf. And the guf, the whole word of the guf is that he should take the offer after min Adama. That the offerata, that which a person comes from offer, should be in maila, mizan zdachich, until memata l'maila. Connect to lakus, take this offer and connect it to lakus. And these two inyanim, Simon Tzad and Neshama, Simon Tzad the Guf, are connected to these two zmanim of Shabbos and the Me'er Shavua. Shabbos is the Aveda of the Neshama. And like it says, Shabbos, that the Melech Basodeh is that a person's Aveda is an Eifin of Shabbos, and a person's Aveda is Mitzad the Neshama is that he doesn't, is Shalei B'Seiv Adraga. It doesn't have a order, it doesn't have a definition of how Aveda is. Aveda is an Eifin of Bligvul. Mashiach Mitzad the Guf is Aveda expresses of Dafkin Yimei HaShavua. And the Aveda of the Yimei HaShavua is Takim B'Seiv Midagil Adarga. It's B'Seiv Adraga, and an Eifin Mugbal. And Yimei HaShavua is Yimei Achel. Yimei Achel means that he doesn't do anything which is opposite his Mitzias. It's Yimei Achel, it's something which is his mundane, regular weekday. And that's Aveda Mitzad the Guf. So these two inyanim of Mamayla Mata L'Mayla express themselves Sai in Zman, and Sai in the Yid's Mitzias, in the Shaman as a Guf, and then express an Aveda of Yimei Achel and Yimei HaShabbos. So that's how we see that a Yid's Aveda not only is compromised of Isrusul L'Sata, of Mamata L'Mayla, but the Eibishter gave a Yid that his Aveda should be in an Eifin of Mamayla L'Mata, that in a Nivra Mugbal should also have this Tnuah, should also have this concept of Blig Vul, of something which is Mamayla L'Mata. Now, Chedesh Elul, you said before, isn't only the Aveda of Ani L'Deidi. Chedesh Elul also is the Aveda of Vodei Li, which means in Chedesh Elul you need to have these two Avedas together. In Chedesh Elul, you have to have the Aveda Matal Amayla, which is the Aveda Valin Adedi. But together with that, since Chedesh Elul is a sikkim of the whole year, is a cheshmer nefesh of the whole year, and in the whole year you have to have the Aveda also of Isrus Leila, Yom Shabbos. So therefore, in Chedesh Elul, you have to have, even though the whole Chedesh Elul you may achel, but you have to have in Chedesh Elul these two Avedas together. Meaning, it's not pshat that he has one day of the week he's going to do the Aveda Mamayla Lamata, and another day of the week he does the Aveda Mamayla Lamata. In each Aveda, he has to have a tnuah of Mamayla Lamata and Mamayla Lamata. Like you see B'Peil, even though Shabbos and Yom Tov and Mamayla Lamata, Shabbos and Yom Tov are days which are higher than Zman, which is the Nivra, but together with that, Shabbos and Yom Tov are one of the days of the week. And like we say, Shiur Shayim and Shabbos and Yom Tov, because it's not one of the days of the week. So even though Shabbos and Yom Tov is Mamayla Lamata, but together with that, it's still part of the days of the week, which are Yemei Achel. It's part of the Aveda Mamayla Lamata. And so to the other way around, even the Yemei Achel, which are Yemei Achel B'cholos of the Aveda of Mamayla Lamata, B'cholos of the Aveda of Eifon of Akbala, that a person does from stage to stage until he gets to Shabbos, Mishatarach B'Shabbos, Yechah B'Shabbos. Together with that, the mitzvah of Zachas Yom Shabbos Akach, according to Beis Shammai, is that every single day you have to remember Shabbos in a regular day. And like it says about Shammai in a regular day, that if you find some good food, he would keep in mind that food should be for Shabbos. And if the next day he found a better one, he'll keep in mind that he would eat the first one and keep in mind that the next food should be for Shabbos. So the whole week, in Yomei Achel, which is the Aveda Mamayla Lamata, you have to have also the tnuah of Mamayla Lamata, the tnuah of Shabbos, which is higher than Vel. So those are the two Avedas, Mamayla Lamata and Mamayla Lamata. And then now you have to have both, side Aveda Mamayla Lamata and side Aveda Mamayla Lamata. Now, l'chayra bazei, if and now you have to have both Avedas. Side Aveda that represents the Neshama, side Aveda that is represented by the Guf. And there's two Kavanas, and two in Yonim, Mamayla Lamata and Mamayla Lamata. So why is Elul, the main Oshtevis of Elul, is Ani Lidodi? Why is the whole Arichas and Chassidus that Elul, the whole word of Elul is Ani Lidodi, and then V'Deidili? If they have both Avedas, Simon Mamayla Lamata and Simon Mamayla Lamata, so it could be either V'Deidili or Ani Lidodi. Why is that Kavanah and Dafka Ani Lidodi? Why are we separating the Aveda of Ani Lidodi as opposed to Aveda of V'Deidili? Maybe you tell me that Ani Lidodi is Aveda of the person, and then you have V'Deidili is the Aveda is the Amshachim Mamayla, so you can understand that that Elul means that a person should do his Aveda. But now that you tell me that also V'Deidili, that also the Isrus Leila isn't only Stam Hamshachah that comes in Maila, but it's an Aveda a person has to do. So both Avedas are them. If both Avedas are them, why is there first Ani L'Deidi then V'Deidili? So the explanation is that these two Avedas of Mamayla Lamata and Mamayla Lamata, or the Neshama and the Guf, and the weekday in Shabbos, even though the two Avedas a person does, at the end of the day the Kavanah is that a person should have a Dirib Tachtenim. That a person should make a Dirib Tachtenim for the Eibishter. That for a person, how does a person make a Dirib Tachtenim for the Eibishter? That's Be'ikeh, not through the Aveda of the Neshama, even though that's also an Aveda. And it's also an Aveda of the Neshama Beguf, meaning it's part of the Aveda of the Dirib Tachtenim. Part of the Aveda of the Dirib Tachtenim is that a person should also be Kach in Torah, and also Kach in things which are Shaykh to the Neshama. Because at the end of the day, the Neshama is down, is in the Eilam Hazah. So that's also Pel in of Dirib Tachtenim. And there's a whole concept of Dirib Tachtenim through Torah. A lot of Lishkim Neshamas Yisrael. But on the other hand, where is Mizbata Bagili? The Indian of Dirib Tachtenim, where do we see a Dira in a Tachtin? In a Tachtin, where do we see a Dira in a Tachtin? Dafke in a Guf. That the Guf Dafka comes from Afar. Which Afar is the lowest, the Tachtin, Shein Tachtin, the Matan Men of which is a Daimon. And Dafke in the Afar should be Mezach the Afar. Mezach the body, that the body should be Nizdachich and go Maila and be affected by the Neshama. Now, so Dafke in the Aved of the Guf, that's where we see the Ini of the Dirib Tachtenim. And so too we see where Lagabe in Zman, that even though Shabbos is the holiest day of the week, but on the other hand, a person doesn't start counting the days of the week from when he was created. Adam Rishon was created on Yom Shishi, which is just before Shabbos. And the Peil, when we start counting the days of the week, we start from Yom Rishon, we start from Sunday. And the reason for that is because Sunday represents the Seder Zman of Seder in a Tachtin. That which a person was created on Yom Shishi, that was just before Shabbos, and that was, the world was Elam and Milui Nivra, and the world was already in the high Ma'am of the Matzah. And Adam Rishon was created in Gan Eden. But Yom Rishon represents the world being created as a Tachtin. And that's why people didn't count the days of the week from Yom Rishon. Yom Rishon Shabbos is from the first day from Sunday, because that represents the Tachton of Dirim Tachtenim. So the Gabi Giluim Take is the Ma'ilin of Eretz Neshama. And Yidin Machlal, you have two different types of Yidin. You have Yidin which are Yisachar and Zvul. Yisachar, which is Esig and Torah. And Torah is the union of Ma'ilin Lamata. It means that the way you mamshach Likus in Velt, not in the Gedarim of Velt, not in the you're not looking at Velt as a Mitzid, but as a Tachton. You're just being mamshach Likus into the Tachton and being in a way being Mavatal the Tachton. And then you have the Aveda of Zvulun, the Aveda of Mitzvahs of a Baal Esek, which is representing the Aveda of Dirim Tachtenim. And that's at the end of it. That's the kavanah. The kavanah is dafke in the dirim tachtenim, and that's why the Aveda of Ella isn't represented by Daidili, even though in Ella you also have a union of Isus Leili. You also have a union of representing the Aveda Mamayil Lamata. But at the end of it, it's not the kavanah. The kavanah is dafke in the Neshama beguf, dafke in the guf, and that's why it's represented by dafke Ani Lidodi, which Ani Lidodi represents the Aveda of the Tata, it represents the Aveda of a Nivra. Als Mesib b'fnei atzma, it's a guf. Als offer min adama, and is the mezachich that guf with his mitzias, and it doesn't only mean a guf gashmis. It also means the mitzias of the person, a person's hakbalas, and the person's character, and in mevar that inyan. That's the kavanah derib tachtenim. Sa'at kan is the beer in the two avedas of Mamayla Mata Mamata Lamayla, and the kavanah is dafkan avedas atachtim derib tachtenim. At the end of the day, these two inyanim of Mamayla Lamata and Mamata Lamayla, even though they're both avedas of a person, but they're two separate inyanim. They're two separate things. Mitzal inyanim, the way they are without the aveda of a person, for sure they're separate things. Side aveda, side the inyan of Yisurus Lasata, which is the avedas of Adam, and side Yisurus Leila, which has nothing to do with avedas of Adam. That's for sure they're two separate things. But even in this here, where we're saying over here that in avedas of Adam Gufa, there's two separate avedas of Mamayla Lamata and Mamata Lamayla, and they're represented by the Neshama and the Guf. They're two separate avedas. And we're saying in the Nel, you have to have these two separate avedas. You have to have side aveda of the Neshama and side aveda of the Guf. But then comes the third union of which there does a lot of times, which is a Chibur of both of these avedas. So the aveda of Mamayla Lamata is connected to the aveda of Mamata Lamayla, and so to the other way around, that they become one union. What does it mean they become one union? Each of these avedas, side the aveda of the Neshama and side the aveda of the Guf, have a Maila, Yash Bazeh Mashem Bazeh. The Maila, the avedas of the Neshama is that it's Hecher. The Maila of the avedas of the Neshama is that the Neshama is a Chelik Lekam Yimal Mamish. It's a Chelik Lekam Yimal, which means that it's Mamshech Adag V'Lekus, which is higher than Ivroim. It's Mamshech Adag V'Lekus, which is higher than the definitions of creation, the definitions of David Sameach Chaim Medaber. It's a Chelik Lekah, which means that it doesn't have the Gdorim of Elam Hazeh, and therefore it's able to mamshach of the world a dagar v'lakus, the Eir Leki, which is bligvul, Eir Leki, which doesn't come down into the Gdorim of Velt because it's higher than the Gdorim of Velt. And how that is Zeh calling Yoni. The whole union of the Neshama is to be mamshach lakus in Velt, but in the Eifen that it's a chelik lekam yimal mamish. So if you're being asing the Avedas of Neshama, which is in this sichid represented by the Aveda of Yisachar, the Aveda of Torah. So Ein Chanami Torah speaks about the Nyanim which have to do with Vel. But at the end of the day, the whole mitzvah of Torah is to be shared on Allah Elam, to be shared on the Vel. Or Mamshach Alakos, which is Herchen in Vel. Mashayin can the Aveda of the Guf, being Mevar of the Guf of Nefesh Bahamis, or more general the Aveda of a Baal Esek, of Zvulun. So he has to do with the Nyanim Elam. So mitzad echa, the istaka mugbal, the istaka has to do with the guf and the shvahamis and yana elam, which all these things are dvarim mugbalim, the things which are limited. And if they're limited, means they're only able to be connected to a limited level of elikus, because gvul and vligvul aren't able to go together. So mitzad echa, the istaka reaching a lower level of elikus, the level of elikus which is able to relate to nivraim. Mitzad sheni, since it's able to relate to nivraim, then it's a ma'ila that it's relatable to nivraim. And since it's relatable to Nivraim, means it's able to mamshach b'primis in Nivraim. It's stuck not at the highest level of Lakos, but it's nimshach b'primis. It has to do and is relevant to the world of Nivraim. Mamshach Lakos in the Gdarim of a Tachten. So Yash B'zeh, Mashem B'zeh, there's a Maila in having an Eir which is Bligvul and breaks the Gdarim of Velt. And then you have the Maila in Eir which comes down into the Gdarim of Velt and is able to Mevar Velt because he speaks the Sprach of Velt. And he's able to be mislabish in Velt. which is a difference between makif, the difference between the mila of makif and primi. Something which is makif, it's like a higher than what is being makif. But on the other hand, that itself makes it that it's not able to come into primis. If they bring the dogma we brought before of Riyan Shmiya, that when a person sees something, the thing that he's seeing is higher than who he is. In other words, it's not coming down into his world. He's not sure that he's understanding what he saw, and he can't explain to what he saw. But that itself is a ma'ila l'chesar. The ma'ila is that it's higher than his mitzias, and it's something which is unrelatable. He doesn't have to touch it into what he saw because it's something which is higher than being touched days. Mitzad Sheni, it's the impact that it has on him is not something that he himself did with his own aved. It wasn't established in the premise. It's not established in his understanding. It's not established in his own language. As opposed to when a person understands something, so it's true. He's not understanding the etzem inyan of what he's understanding because he's understanding the way that he's touching up the inyan or the way the inyan is being touched up to him. On the other hand, it's his understanding. He's able to relate to it in his language, in his terms. And that's the difference between Aveda Mamayla and Mata Mamata Mamayla. The Mamayla and Mata, when a person is Mamshach Likus in Welt, so the Maila is that it's coming from a high level of Likus. On the other hand, it's breaking the Gedarim of Welt. Tzad the Aveda of the Tachtin, of the Aveda of the Guf, that's who the person is. And therefore it's establishing in Primis. So these two Avedas are two different Kavim, the way Yid serves the Eibishter. The Tachlis is that you have both things, both Mailas together. The Maila of his slapshus, the Maila of something coming down into Primis, and together with that, being Mamshech a level of a Lakut which is higher than Nivroim. In the Asis, in our context, that the Doidi Li, that the Vedim of Maila Lamata comes and is Nimshach be Primis in the Anilo Doidi. That in the Anilo Doidi we have a Amshach of Maila Lamata. And we see this prepared with the Aved and the Neshama and the Guf. Where does the neshama that is megale, his inyan, his tachas hakavan, even though bepel the neshama comes into the world, the neshama is higher than the guf, and the neshama is a chelik alikami mimal mamish. On the other hand, the way the neshama reaches the shleim is when it comes dafka to the guf, dafka to the tachta. And where do we see that a keich atzmicha is able to grow? Where do we see the keich atzmus, that something is able to grow, a new mitzias is able to come, the only new mitzias that we have in the world? Where is able to come from? Dafka Afar, Dafka Earth, the lowest mitzias in the world. Dafka the Tachtan, the inyan of Mematan Maila, the Tachtan, that's able to bring out the Shleimus of Nivroim. So the Shleimus Aveda is that the Anila Deidi, that which a person is connected to Lakus, mitzad his mitzias, is not the higher than his mitzias. The Gvul Shabbos, it's not the higher than his mitzias, his Hakbalis. His chesenis, his agbalas as a mitzvah of the atzmei. What's at the head? It's the head daily. It's the head of his bligvul should be. In the bligvul you have gvul. So now the shaila is, how does that happen? How do you have that in a nivra you have a nivra which is a mugbal, and enechanami nivra has a part of it which is bligvul, which is the neshama, but the neshama is in the guf and the guf is in the neshama. So if the neshama and the guf are two separate entities, two separate mitzvahs, and gvul and bligvul are opposite from each other. So how do you have that the bligvul should be mislavish in the gvul and be mislavish to primis in a way that it resonates with who he is? Now the Reverter use all the shenis avedim sis nefesh aveda bligvul. The aveda bligvul is aveda that's able to, it takes a person out of his gdorim, out of his definitions, out of his limitations. So how does the aveda sis nefesh play itself out in Muhammad every single day in aveda mugbelas on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? And how does that have an effect on a person that it should change who he is in his day-to-day life, in his anilu day? So the answer to that is that a yid has different daggers of the neshama, and all the levels we spoke, all the avedas that we spoke until now, the side aveda of anilu day, side aveda of day li, all different daggers of the neshama. The way the neshama already expresses itself in giluyim, the way the neshama already expresses itself in definitions, and mitzad giluyim. The definition of Giluyim is that it brings out a specific teichen. It has everything in Giluyim, everything has to have a teichen, everything has to have a tzir, everything has to have a form. The teichen of Gvul is to be Gvul, and the teichen of Bli Gvul is to be Bli Gvul. Because Giluyim means that he's bringing out a certain definition of the Moed, a certain definition of its makir. That's the Chiddush of El Mahadeh, which is Mitziyusah, which feels a Yesh Mitziyusah Matzmuseh. He doesn't bring out any definition. It's not Giluyim, he doesn't bring out any Gilui of the Moed. So mitzad giluim take, these two Avedas are two separate things, and not only that, they're steered to each other. Mitzad giluim, the reason why they're steered to each other is because L'mayla l'mata is there to bring in a certain inyan in Likkutei, and that makes it its Maila. And L'mata l'mayla, the person's Aveda mitzad, the Tachtin, is there to bring in a certain inyan in Likkutei, the Gvul of Likkutei, and that's how it's supposed to be that way, mitzad the Gvul of Likkutei. And mitzad giluim, that's how it's supposed to be that way. If you're going to ask Bli Gvul, what is his Teichen? I'll tell you, his Teichen is to bring in the Bli Gvul of the Eibishter. And therefore, Velt isn't supposed to be Tevis Makim. He's supposed to break Velt. He's not supposed to be Mislabish in Velt. Velt is a stira to him being Mislabish in him. Not because it's a Chisar, not because it's a Maila. His Maila is that he's not Tevis Makim in Velt. And then if you're going to ask a Malach Alamim, if you're going to ask Aved Mamatal Maila, or a person who's a Balesik, what is his Teichen? His Teichen, he's going to tell you, his Teichen is going to be to bring out the Gvul of Likkutei, to bring out how Likkutei is coming down into the premise of Velt on Velt's terms. So his Aved is not to be Megala, the Bli Gvul of Likkutei. But mitzad the etzem of the neshama, mitzad the yichid of the neshama, which connects to Yisrael v'Yisrael v'Kutshubrichu kol echad. That mitzad the yichid l'yachta, Yidin are one with the Eibishter, mitzad the etzem of the Eibishter. So there is no definitions of how the Aved is supposed to be. There is no tzir. It's not felt in the neshama, the limitations of the definitions of the neshama. All that's felt in the neshama is one thing, yichid l'yachta. And mitzad yichid l'yachta, there is no way that the Aved is supposed to be. There is no way that there's no teichen of how the Aved is supposed to be. There's one inyan. The inyan is the Yichid l'Yachta to be connected to the Eibishter. And mitzad Likkutei, if that's the focus is how he's one with the Eibishter, not how he's there to bring the Eibishter into Velt or into be Megala something with the Eibishter. Mitzad how the Eibishter is Vir is Elein. So Gvul and Bli will understand each other. The reason why Gvul and Bli will understand each other because the Etzem is Kveshahu. The Etzem is he does what he wants. There's no teichen of what things are supposed to be. Just like in a person has ratzin and a person has seichel. Ratzin and seichel are hipul on lakatza lakatza. Ratzin is the way a person is higher than definitions. A person wants; it doesn't have to be based on reasoning. And seichel is the way a person it has a definition of has having to make sense. The part of the person that expresses itself and having to make sense. And these two things are steered to each other. Ratzin is, and that's why Ratzin is makif and seichel is primi. But mitzad the etzem and neshama, mitzad the etzem, there's no such thing as this is how it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to make sense, how it's not supposed to make sense. It's how he wants it to be. How he wants it to be, that's how it's going to work. V'meila, l'gabe the Eibishter, and l'gabe the etzem of a yid, which is connected to the etzem of the Eibishter. So these two things are understood to each other. That's the emes and ma'ila of a yid. Like Hashem said that the pshitas of a yid is megal, the pshitas of atzmus. That the pshitas of a yid's aveda. How in aveda b'peil, a yid could bring down this pshitas, this daiga of the neshama, which is the etzem yichid l'yachtav. He could bring it down into aveda b'peil, and how in his day-to-day life, how in his aveda v'ani l'deidi, of the aveda of his mitzias is derher, the aveda v'deidi li of the ma'il mata of Bli Gvul, which means that his day-to-day life looks and eifon of Bli Gvul, not in a way that he doesn't derher, not in a way that is higher than his limitations, higher than his mitzias, but his mitzias gufa is something which is completely penetrated with aveda of Bli Gvul in a way that it comes into his mitzias, and that is true. That being megala, the true ani, the yichid l'yachdach, the part of the neshama which is completely one with the Eibishter. And that's the tachas of the חיבור of ani לדודי ודודי, and that's why it's in the same Rashi Tevis. It's in the same word, not because Elo is achanu to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and not because of Yud Gimel Salachma, because in Elo Gufa is mantzich the Aveda, the חיבור of Sayani L'Deidi and Sayv L'Deidi, and they become one thing that you can't separate between them together. So that's the two sichos of Chelik Beis. Next year we're going to focus on the Chelik Gimel, which is Chelik Gimel and Chelik Dalet, which is going to focus on two essential biyunim that the Rebbe has on the mashal of Melech Basodeh of what the Yidden are doing in the Sadeh and what the Eibishter is doing in the Sadeh, and the Maila of the Sadeh, why Yidden and the Eibishter are found specifically in the Sadeh.